One of the craziest games of the season ended up in a loss for the Orioles on Wednesday. But if they are dealt, it gave us some cool goodbye moments for Ryan O'Hearn and Cedric Mullins. And I'll recap it coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' tough back and forth 9-8 loss to the Toronto Blue Jays on Wednesday afternoon. I'll get to the 5 things you need to know from that one, including some cool potential final moments from Cedric Mullins and Ryan O'Hearn in Orioles uniforms, a so-so start from Dean Kramer, and a real tough inning there from Yennier Cano. Then we'll talk a little bit about some trade rumors surrounding the Orioles. Many of them might be old news by the time that you hear this episode, but still want to talk about the ones going around, and a bit of minor league news around the Orioles system at the end as well. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. Only valid through September 30th. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. So just a little context for this episode. I am recording here right around 6 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday evening. The Orioles have lost to the Toronto Blue Jays earlier today, which we will talk about. As of today, or as of the time of this recording, about 6 p.m., the O's have not yet made a trade here on Wednesday. Now, they don't play again until Friday. So there is time to make these deals between now and the 6 p.m. Eastern time deadline on Thursday. And it's very possible the Orioles trade someone like Ryan O'Hearn or Charlie Morton on Wednesday evening. If that ended up being the case, there would be another episode that is recorded by me that's in your YouTube feeds, in your podcast audio feeds on Wednesday evening, recapping just that specific trade. This episode, of course, is going out Thursday morning. It'll be focused a little bit on the deadline, but mostly on Wednesday's game and some of this minor league news as well. Any trades made Wednesday, I'll get to on separate episodes. Anything made on Thursday, I have a special trade deadline live show. I'll be going live at 6:15 p.m. Eastern time on the evening of today, Thursday, July 31st. You can watch live on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. You get notified when we're going live on Thursday, and that will cover every single deal the Orioles make on Thursday, or if they make a really late night one on Wednesday and I just can't get to it with a live episode. But we're talking about the game on this one. Unfortunately, the Orioles looked like they were on their way to potentially not just sweeping, but mopping in a 4-game series, the Toronto Blue Jays this week. They got the blowout wins Monday night and Tuesday afternoon, got the incredible hold-on late rally win on Tuesday night to sweep the doubleheader, and they had a lead in the 7th inning of Wednesday's game, unfortunately lost it and fell 9-8 as the Blue Jays were able to salvage the final game of the series. The Orioles, with the loss, dropped to 50-59. That is their record. 9 games under 500, about 7 to 8 games back of the wild card. Entering deadline day, that is the record and the position of a selling team, which is why they've already traded Brian Baker, Gregory Soto, and Seranthony Dominguez, with more to come. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 9-8 loss to the Blue Jays on Wednesday. And the first thing you need to know is Cedric Mullins made the catch of the year again, because just last week, Mullins had that incredible diving play in the gap, which felt like the catch of the year for him. And then he made one of the most absurd home run robberies I have ever seen, scaling the wall in right center field in the 6th inning to take away what looked like surely a 2-run home run for Blue Jays backup catcher Ali Sanchez that would have flipped the score and put the Jays up 6-5 at the time, Orioles leading 5-4 when that ball was hit. And just, his cleat marks were in the wall because he used it to propel himself up, full extension over the wall, clearly going to be gone, brings it back. Just an awesome moment to end the inning and keep the Orioles in the lead. Another vintage Cedric Mullins catch, and it comes at a time when it's very possible that could have been Mullins' final game in an Orioles uniform. His final defensive highlight as an Oriole being that one would just be the cherry on top of Mullins' career in Baltimore. And then, of course, right, he comes up to bat in the bottom of the sixth inning and he doubles into the left center field gap, which could be his final hit. As an Oriole had a bunt single earlier in this game, we really got the full Cedric experience. Only thing he didn't do was steal a base in this one. And again, just what a way to go out if it is Cedric's final game in Baltimore. Really only the Mets and Astros at times have been rumored to be interested in Cedric Mullins at this deadline. A lot of the reporting around the Mets is that they prefer Luis Robert from the White Sox, but if they can't get him, they'll turn to Mullins. And I've talked about it really the whole time we've been previewing this deadline with the Orioles of sellers. I've said again and again, like, it's completely possible that Cedric Mullins gets dealt if the Orioles get the right deal. I just have no idea what his value is. And of all the guys we've been talking about, of all the rentals, Mullins felt like the most likely to remain an Oriole beyond the deadline just because I didn't really know what kind of deal would materialize for a player like that. There's not a lot of rental center fielders that are dealt at the deadline anyway. And Mullins did have a chance to have an even bigger moment because in what ended up being maybe his final Orioles at bat, if he gets traded, he came up in a huge spot. The Orioles, who were down 9-5 heading into the bottom of the seventh, the game looked over. They started to rally. Jackson, Westberg, and Adley and Gunnar hit after hit after hit. And all of a sudden, it's bases loaded, 1 out, and it's a 9-8 game. The Orioles have already put 3 on the board, and the Blue Jays, Yariel Rodriguez, who's been amazing this year, was just horrible in that 7th inning. Blue Jays pull him. They go to Brandon Fisher, and Fisher comes in, long AB with Mullins. Mullins, I mean, just a force out, a sac fly, whatever it may be. At the very least, you're looking for him to tie the game. Unfortunately, he swings through a 2-2 curveball and strikes out. And then Ramon Laureano takes a 3-2 pitch that looked like it was off the plate outside. Vic Carapazza called it strike 3 to end the inning, keep the Blue Jays in that 9-8 lead. It was one final chance for Cedric Mullins to make an Orioles moment. Unfortunately, couldn't come up with it, but still had a good day. And that catch will live on for a long, long time in Baltimore. And the second thing you need to know from the Wednesday loss is that OHearn had a pretty cool moment as well in what I think is even more likely than Mullins to be his final game as an Oriole. In the first inning, 2-run laser home run into the flag court off of Blue Jay starter Jose Barrios to put the Orioles up 3-0. They got a 3 spot in the first in this one. Just the second home run of the month for Ryan OHearn. His power has definitely cooled down, and he hit the ball 106.7 miles an hour off the bat. Also his second hardest hit ball of the month of July. But after a rough June and a not so great start to July, OHearn starting to pick it up offensively again. He finishes the month on a 4-game hitting streak, 6 for 18 with a double, triple homer and 6 RBIs in that stretch. And again, just cool potential final Orioles moments for both of these guys. Unfortunately, he too struck out in what could be his final Orioles at bat because he was the final chance for the O's. 2 outs, nobody on, bottom 9 in a 9-8 game. Ran it full 3-2 and then swung and missed on a Jeff Hoffman splitter to end Wednesday's game. But they still got some of those final moments, potentially. Again, not definitely. The trade hasn't happened yet here, 6:01 p.m. Eastern time, but potentially what could be their final moments with the O's. Third thing you need to know from that Wednesday loss is that Dean Kramer was just kind of all right in this one. I mean, no other way to really put it than he was just kind of okay. Some starts are just like that. 5 innings of 3-run ball for Kramer on 6 hits. He strikes out 5. He walks 2. He allows a home run on 87 pitches. And Kramer had been on a roll. He had that terrible April. He was great since May 1st. And then he just had a real clunker of a start on Friday night in the one game the Orioles lost to the Rockies this weekend. He still pitched 6 innings, but he gave up 5 runs. He just wasn't that good. He was better against a much better offense facing Toronto on Wednesday, but it still wasn't the Kramer we've seen for the past couple of months or so. His command was okay. He had a little more of his splitter. He basically had no feel for his splitter against the Rockies. That's his best strikeout pitch, and that's why he struggled. He had a little better feel for it on Wednesday, but he still only threw it 13 times. He did get 4 whiffs on 6 swings, but you could tell it still wasn't all the way back, because if he has it all the way back, he throws it well more than 13 times in any given start. The command was fine. He didn't have a lot of swing and miss stuff outside of the splitters that he did throw. And what's really going to hurt you in a start is allowing a home run to Miles Straw. And that is what he did. He gave up a 2-run shot to Straw in the second as he cut the Orioles lead to 3-2 at the time. Just the second home run of the year for Miles Straw, who of course had those just horrendous offensive seasons in Cleveland, but was backed up by being one of the best center field defenders in baseball, was traded to the Blue Jays this offseason. He's played a little bit more than they thought because his bat's been a little bit better than they thought it would be. But for Miles Straw, not only his second home run of the year, just his 8th career homer in almost 2,200 big league plate appearances. This is a guy who does not hit the ball out of the ballpark. He also had an RBI double later in this game in the 6th that cut the lead to 5-4. That was right before the Mullins robbed home run. Just the second game of the year for Straw and the 7th of his career, which has had multiple extra base hits. So not great to get beaten by Miles Straw. He contributes to 3 of the 9 runs and you lose by 1. That is not a great feeling. And it could have been worse for Kramer. But the Orioles made another outstanding defensive play. 1st and 3rd, 1 out in the 5th in a 3-3 game with Bo Bichette at the plate. Hits a semi-shallow fly ball out to Colton Cowser in left field. Makes the catch, makes a perfect throw on a bounce home. And Alex Jackson tags out Ernie Clement. Originally called safe, went to review, called him out to end the inning and keep the game tied 3-3. Nice of the Orioles to finally get a clean out at home plate. What a throw from Cowser. And it was a cool moment to help out Dean, but it was the final batter that he faced. Fourth thing you need to know from this loss is that Cowser out kind of set up what we thought would be the biggest swing of this game from Jordan Westber, because he steps up with a runner on third and 1 out in a 3-3 game in the bottom of the 5th. Jose Barrios was still out there, and in one swing on one pitch, he knocks Barrios out of the game, launching a 2-run homer to left center field to put the Orioles up 5-3. Capping off, he did have another single later, but capping off what was just an unbelievable month of July for Jordan Westber, where he was mostly healthy throughout the month. He hit .341 with a .927 OPS in July. That is what Westber can do when he's healthy. That's the level of player that we saw make the All-Star team back in 2024 and then just have so many injury issues. Since then, he's been on the field pretty much, not all the way, but pretty much all month. And that is the way he can carry your offense. It's been awesome to see. This Orioles team has just seen Jose Barrios so much. Wednesday was his 19th career start against the O's. He's only made more starts against the Royals. That came back in his time in Minnesota. But I think the maybe even bigger story than Jordan Westber, maybe not for the Orioles long term, but what's going on right now is the fact that Alex Jackson set up that 2-run homer, because Jackson, catching on Wednesday in the 9-hole, had a leadoff double off the left field wall against Barrios and ended up putting the runner in scoring position. That tied an MLB record. Jackson's double in the 5th made his first 8 hits with the Orioles all extra base hits. It's all been doubles and home runs for Jackson. His 8 hits since they plucked him out of AAA with the Yankees when they just needed a catcher. He stuck around, right? Adley comes back. Jacob Stallings DFA'd. Jackson remains the backup. And that ties a big league record. Your first 8 hits with a new team, all being extra base hits. That stat's been tracked since 1974. And the only 2 others to have the first 8 be extra bases are Troy Glaus with the 2005 Diamondbacks. And how about Orioles legend Brandon Snyder, their former first-round pick out of high school? He did this with the Atlanta Braves back in 2016. And Jackson did not get another hit for the rest of the game. So if his next hit is a double, triple, or homer, he will set a new all-time record, which is just another wild piece of trivia from this 2025 Orioles season. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 9-8 loss to the Blue Jays on Wednesday afternoon is that, unfortunately, Yennier Cano just had a full meltdown inning in this one in the 7th, and was one of the, not the reason, but one of the bigger reasons why the Orioles lost this game. Now, I'm not saying everybody else out of the bullpen was good, because Grant Wolfram was not very good in the 6th. He ended up giving up a run, came in with a 5-3 lead. It was 5-4, but remember, he was on the mound when Mullins robbed the 2-run homer. So Mullins saved him from a 3-run inning and maybe even worse. So Cano goes out there, gets the 7th. It's a 5-4 lead, and he's facing the top of the Blue Jay order. He's one of your veteran, higher leverage guys who's fairly well rested out there in the bullpen. So he's going to get that spot at the top of the order. And it was just bad. I mean, single, ground out, 2-run single makes it 6-5. There was a walk in there, and then a 3-run homer from Nathan Lucas, and you look up, and it's 9-5 Blue Jays. 5 earned runs allowed by Cano. He only recorded 2 outs. I mean, Cade Stroud had to relieve him just to finish off that 7th inning. Just the 3rd time in Cano's big league career in which he's allowed at least 5 runs in a game. But this one was worse because the other 2 times happened back in 2022. That was pre-All-Star Cano. Cano was an All-Star in 2023. One of them, he allowed 5 runs when he was still with the Twins, even before the trade to the Orioles. And another one, he allowed 7 runs in like a 2-inning appearance in September that year with the Orioles. But those are both in 22. Those are before the Orioles kind of fixed him, worked with him that offseason, and turned him into the all-star setup man he was that next year. So I don't even count those two. Those two were a very different version of Yennier Cano. This one is more of the current version, and this is not good because he also had an outing earlier this year in the Wild loss to Tampa when the O's had an 8-0 lead. He gave up 4 earned runs in an outing in that game, which at that point was the most he'd given up since those 2022 games. But now he gives up 5, and just, again, it's some bad outings that are ballooning his ERA to over 5 this season. But we're all pretty clear on this. He's not the same pitcher he was 2 years ago when he was an all-star. He's not really the same pitcher he was last year when he took a step back, but he was still like a really, really good late inning bullpen option for the Orioles. He's neither of those guys so far in 2025. He's still a major league level reliever. I know people get frustrated with him, but the stuff is still there. The numbers generally, the underlying stuff is still there for him to be a big league reliever for a good team, but he's not really a setup guy anymore. He's more of a solid middle relief guy at this point, and it could get worse. Like, I'm not saying it won't, but what I am positive thinking about Cano is that he's made changes before. Right. And that is what gives me hope that he'll still be good. And he's not, the Orioles are not going to DFA him. They're not going to give him away. He still even has minor league options next year. So it's, if you hold on to him and he starts to struggle again, you can freely send him to AAA and try and fix him. You can try to do what you did to Brian Baker, right? You rehaul him, AAA time, learn a new pitch, come back and be really good. That's still very much in the cards for Yennier Cano going into next season. And he's going to remain in this Oriole bullpen for the rest of this year, no matter what, just because he's one of the most experienced guys out there after dealing away all those relievers and have so many rookie arms in the pen right now. And we're going to see some games like this down the stretch because of the way this pen is built, but you don't want it to come from your veteran, experienced guy like Cano. And, the home run he gave up to Lucas, which broke the game open. I mean, he's throwing a high and in slider to a left-hander. We just can't be doing that. He only threw 2 changeups. The changeup is a pitch he's kind of gone away from. I think it's because he's not getting as much movement. The velocity is too close to his sinker. He's got to work on the thing I need Cano to do this offseason. 2 things. 1, different changeup grip. You need a grip that allows the ball to move a little bit more and slow the ball down a little bit. So maybe talk to Brian Baker about different changeup grips, whatever it may be. He needs a new changeup grip. And the other thing is his sinker's getting hit. He has a 4-seam fastball. Sometimes it's better. He needs to throw more 4-seam fastballs. It's a change he made at one point last year when he was struggling. I'm confident he can do it again. That's why I still believe in Cano, because he's shown the ability multiple times, right? Coming over from the Orioles to turn into an all-star. Then last year when he struggled, he made a switch and got better. He's been so willing to change and adapt to get better. He's not one of those hard-headed guys who says it's my way or the highway. That makes me think, hey, the stuff is still in there. The underlying things are still in there. He is one of the guys I'm most confident in will turn this around. And hopefully it happens by the end of this year and he'll have some chance to kind of work through some things as well. Unfortunately, when you have a bad outing like that in that big of a spot, even when your offense rallies, you still lose a game. And that's what the Orioles do. Unable to mop it. Still a successful series, 3 out of 4 against the first place Blue Jays, who came in as the hottest team in baseball. And the Orioles sent them away with Sir Anthony Dominguez and with a lot more questions than answers about where their team falls in the American League as they head towards the deadline. So speaking of that deadline, it's coming up as I'm recording in just about 24 hours. What could the Orioles still do? Specifically, what are the rumors that are out there at this moment? We will talk about those coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this is a hole-in-one for your energy game. And let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need an extra boost to stay sharp and stay energized. Whether you think about the best shot you've ever made on the golf course, the weirdest course you've played, maybe it's a mini golf course as well, but you need that extra boost. That is where 5-Hour Energy comes in. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the Bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. So after an Orioles loss leads them to 50 and 59 heading into the trade deadline, they are clearly sellers. So far, they've traded Brian Baker, maybe not someone they planned to go into trade, but I predicted they would deal him, and they did. They got an overwhelming offer. They got a good draft pick, turned into Slater DeBrun, one of the best prospects in this year's draft. Gregory Soto and Seranthony Dominguez have already been dealt. Dominguez to the Blue Jays, Soto to the Mets. They were high up on the board of, yeah, you trade them for whatever you can get. They're rental relievers. You're not going to bring them back. They've already made those deals. Now, there's more rentals that are out there, right? Ryan OHearn, still here. Charlie Morton, Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, still here. Cedric Mullins, still here. Even, Ramon Laureano and Andrew Kittredge, who are somewhat in the talks, also are still here. Not all of those players are going to be dealt between now and the 6 p.m. deadline on Thursday, but a chunk of them will be. I would predict that Charlie Morton, I'd say, is 100% getting traded. I'd say Ryan OHearn's at about 90% getting traded. I'd say Zach Eflin's about 60% getting traded. I'd put Mullins maybe right around 60% getting traded as well. I put Laureano at like a 50-50, Sugano at like a 25, and Kittredge at like a 15% chance of getting traded. Those are my predictions. And again, guys could have already been traded by the time you're hearing this, but again, I'm recording 6 p.m. You won't hear from me again until there's another trade booked or on the live show on Thursday. So let's talk about the rumors that are just coming up right now. And again, I'm recording this 6 p.m. Wednesday. It's coming out Thursday morning. Some of these rumors could be old, but they're the ones that are involving the Orioles players over the past few days. This one from John Heyman. The Mets are considering Ramon Laureano to upgrade their outfield, but they have Cedric Mullins and Luis Robert Jr. higher on their list. Heyman reports because they need true help in center field. Robert's number one. If they can't get him, then Mullins number two. But if they can't make that deal work, they would turn to Ramon Laureano, who honestly is probably going to cost more than Mullins, so it's weird having Mullins above him, but they obviously see Mullins as much more of a true center fielder defensively than Laureano is. If you watch today's game, you know that. So that is why they probably prioritize him. And I would say, like, if the Mets or the Astros don't make a deal for Mullins, I'm not sure he's traded because those are kind of the two good fits right now. And otherwise, there's a lot of questions about where he would fall in. Padres are also interested in Ramon Laureano, according to John Heyman. I would think a lot of teams are with how good he's been. It's just a question of, are the Orioles willing to deal him? How high is their price? How much do they just want him back on that cheap team option for next year? Ken Rosenthal reporting this week that the Brewers have interest in Ryan OHearn. That's a pretty good fit. Brewers are like 20th in projected first base production for the rest of the year. Now, they got Andrew Vaughn, resurrected him from the White Sox AAA team, and turned him into a good hitter again somehow, but his projections are still not good, and there's a chance he falls back off a cliff. They have Jake Bowers and Reese Hoskins. Their original two first basemen are both on the injured list at the moment. The Brewers kind of lack a big left-handed bat. OHearn would kind of be a perfect fit for them because, again, he's fairly cheap. They run a low payroll. They can make it work. They have a lot of pitching in AAA to trade. That feels like a perfect matchup. I mean, my prediction right now is OHearn goes to the Brewers. Buster Olney reporting that the Padres are interested in Charlie Morton. We talked about that last week, but John Heyman added in on Wednesday that a lot of other teams are also involved, talking and interested with the Orioles for Morton to kind of put him at the back end of the rotation, maybe not be a playoff starter, but be a guy who helps them get there in the rotation. Then maybe you could stick him in the bullpen for the postseason, which is something he has done before earlier in his career. Other teams that make sense, Dodgers, Mets, back to the Astros is something that could certainly happen for a guy like Charlie Morton. I think he's probably going to be dealt. And then Jesse Rogers of ESPN reporting on Wednesday that the Cubs have shown some interest in Zach Eflin. That's really the first time Eflin's name has truly come up connected to a team, and it comes the day before the deadline. But it's good to know those talks are happening, which means someone at least sees Eflin as healthy and can get closer to that production level he had in the second half with the Orioles last year. If he can get to that, a lot of teams are going to want him. If he looks more like this version, it's more of a toss-up if Eflin does get dealt here on Thursday. But my predictions, I'm going to give a final prediction. And again, this could look stupid because I'm recording at 6 and something could happen afterwards, but you don't hear it till Thursday. My final prediction is Morton gets traded. I think it's going to be the Padres. My final prediction will be OHearn to the Brewers. And we'll say Mullins stays, Laureano stays, Sugano stays, and Eflin, I could predict he goes to the Cubs, but that's the only team out there. Maybe I go a little further off the board. How about Eflin goes to the, how about Red Sox? The Red Sox jump in there and just grab another starter, and they grab Zach Eflin. Those are my official predictions. Probably going to be wrong. We got some minor league news to get to. We'll get to that, to the final segment of the show, coming up next. So a little Orioles minor league news to get to finish off today's show. I mean, the first thing I got to say, this relates more to the trade stuff, but like the Mets, who obviously got Gregory Soto from the Orioles, made a deal for Tyler Rogers, a rental reliever. And Tyler Rogers is great. He's almost unhittable. He's been awesome for the last 5 years, but he's a rental reliever. They gave up Blake Tidwell, starting pitcher who's been in the big leagues already this year, one of their top pitching prospects. They gave up Drew Gilbert, one of their better outfield prospects who's close to the big leagues. And they gave up Jose Budo, who's been a solid big league reliever for them for the past 2 years. All three of those players for a rental reliever. I mean, Rogers is much better than Soto or Dominguez. He's not somebody that the Orioles had to give up, but that's a lot to get back for a rental reliever. So maybe the Orioles could move one of the other guys and get a package potentially like that. But I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of things. First, the Orioles made a minor league signing earlier this week. Jackson Reetz, the 29-year-old right-handed hitting catcher, was brought into the system on a minor league deal. Most likely he'll be in AAA. Remember, the O's getting a little bit healthier, but Chadwick Tromp was released. Jacob Stallings was DFA'd, so they have a little less catching depth at this point. Reetz, 29-year-old, former Nats third-round pick out of high school in 2014. He was in AAA with the Mets this year. 43 games, hitting 197, did have 11 homers with a 90 WRC+, but was released on July 17th. Then 2 weeks later, the Orioles scoop him up. He did play a few games in the big leagues last year, 6 games with the Giants when he was 2 for 14, but a good year in AAA, 114 WRC+ last season. He did debut with the Nationals, play 2 games in 2021, then didn't get back to the big leagues until 2024, but otherwise bounced around. Been kind of a solid catcher, hitter in AAA with the Nats, the Brewers, the Royals, the Giants, and the Mets before hopping on with the Orioles here. He'll just be kind of a depth catcher to have just in case they need it in AAA, which they've certainly needed guys like that a lot this season, so they add Jackson Reetz to the mix. On the flip side, the bad side of the news is that Braxton Bragg, the Orioles announced on Wednesday, had successful Tommy John surgery. This is something that we kind of saw coming. Bragg, the 24-year-old right-handed pitcher who the O's got in the 8th round of the 2023 draft out of Dallas Baptist, was the biggest burst onto the scene pitching prospect in the system this year. When I did an episode about a month ago, I ranked Bragg as my #1 pitching prospect in the Orioles system right now. He had just been incredible, got the bump up to AA this year, 42 2/3 innings, 2.32 ERA, a 34% strikeout rate to a 7% walk rate. Bragg was just putting up absurd numbers. I mean, pitching 7+ innings seemingly every time he went out there. And then the forearm issues came in. Went on the injured list June 12th, the forearm issue. Not all the time, but a lot of times, forearm issue generally leads to elbow issue. He came back 10 days later, June 22nd, made 2 solid starts in that next week, and then went back on the injured list with further forearm issues on July 5th. And once he went back on the IL, that's when you knew, okay, this is going to be a while, and there's a good chance this turns into Tommy John surgery, and that's what it ended up being. He gets the TJ on Wednesday. Obviously, he will be out for the remainder of the 2025 season. He will likely miss most of 2026. I mean, it's at least a year timeline. And best case scenario, he's back at some point in August or September of next year. So there's really a good shot. Bragg also misses all of 2026. Now, the timeline makes him 100% ready to go for spring training 2027. But that really pushes the timeline back for a guy in Braxton Bragg who was looking like it was possible for him to help the Orioles in the second half of next season, maybe earlier. And now you're pushing towards the second half of 2027 at best, maybe not until 2028 because you got to reacclimate him to the minor leagues and just pitching in games. Not good news for the Orioles. He's got great stuff, was a great prospect. Wishing him all the best, a speedy recovery, and hopefully we can see him back on the mound. Hopefully at some point at the end of next season, he's back. And by 2027, we can have that Braxton Bragg to the big leagues conversation again because he was looking like a pitching development, huge W for the Orioles. But as I've talked about, big reason why the Orioles don't take pitchers high in the draft. There's so much injury risk. You get a guy in the 8th round, he pops, he looks great, he gets to AA. Here comes the TJ. You basically got to knock out a year of almost every pitcher, almost assuming they're going to get Tommy John at this point. That is at least how it feels with pitching development. And the final piece of news, we'll kind of get more of this on Friday, but good story in the Baltimore Banner. On Wednesday, good reporting in that one. But depending on where you live or how you feel about it, you can see it as good or bad news. Hayes Gardner and Justin Fenton had the report in this one where it looks like the Aberdeen Ironbirds are no longer going to be the Orioles High A affiliate. There's been some murmurs about this, been a lot of issues with the stadium and the rights to it, and the Ripkins themselves kind of selling their shares in the Ironbirds, and the attendance and issues with the city and Aberdeen and the stadium and the use of it. The Frederick Keys have announced a press conference for this Friday for a big announcement. It seems like the Orioles High A affiliate is going to be switching from Aberdeen back to Frederick, which is where it was before the pandemic for a long time. Then Aberdeen went from short season to High A, and the Keys were cut from being a minor league team. They are putting almost $40 million of renovations into their ballpark in Frederick right now. They currently host a summer league team and an independent ball pro team. There is a chance that maybe the indie ball team gets moved to Aberdeen, and then the minor league team is now in Frederick. It is a beautiful stadium. I've been there once before, but Aberdeen much closer to home, right down the road from where I grew up. So I grew up going to Aberdeen Ironbirds games. It is going to be sad. I mean, that was my very much local baseball team. There's a chance, probably not. I've probably been to more Orioles games, but there was a time in my life where I'd been to more Ironbirds games than Orioles games because it was right down the street, cheaper option, good crowds early, good ballpark. I worked at the Ripken complex for years in the summers during high school and college with the tournaments they host there, which are still going to happen there, but it's at a lower scale because there's bigger, better, nicer complexes they have built like that around the country in warmer weather climates as well. Just going to be sad to be the Ironbirds not be there anymore. They'll still be there in some capacity, maybe a draft league team or an indie ball team or something, because the stadium is still standing and still in fairly good condition. But sad to see them leave Aberdeen, but I know for those of you in further Western Maryland, in the Frederick area, this is a huge win. Obviously, baseball's been there, but with the stadium renovations and you get the High A team affiliated ball back there, I'm very happy for the people of Frederick and the surrounding area in Western Maryland, especially with Hagerstown being cut as well from the Nats system. They're trying to get back into minor league baseball. Cool news for those out there, but sad news for those of us who grew up around the Aberdeen area and the Ironbirds. Not official, but it seems like that announcement is coming on Friday that High A, as early as next season potentially, could be switching from Aberdeen to Frederick. And we'll get you kind of the official news on that when it gets that way on next week, an episode at some point. But that'll do it for today's show. Again, if there was any trades made in the evening on Wednesday, check out Locked on Orioles on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. There's probably an episode dropped there. But any trade made from let's say 10 p.m. Eastern time Wednesday until the deadline, 6 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, will be recapped on the Thursday Orioles trade deadline live show. You can catch it right here on the Locked on Orioles YouTube page, 6:15 p.m. Eastern time. Gives me time to get home from work, gather my thoughts on presumably all the deals the Orioles are going to make, maybe even up to that 6 p.m. deadline, and then going live at 6:15 to break all of them down. It will also be posted on the audio feeds later and kind of serve as the Friday episode of the pod this week. So make sure to be back here. Join us for the live show, 6:15 on Thursday, to break down presumably a good number of trades the Orioles are still going to make between now and the deadline here on Thursday. Happy deadline day. Enjoy all the deals that'll be flying around, and I'll be back with that live show here on Thursday evening. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked on Orioles podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.